Welcome to the Be Kind podcast with your host, Joe Kirkner, presented by the Animal Advocates of South Central Pennsylvania.
Welcome, everybody, to the Be Kind podcast, part of the Animal Advocates mission for a more compassionate world for all living creatures. And we're here to discuss whether or not that includes bugs and insects. You may recall we've talked about this in the past, and we're here to revisit it again with some new phrases and some new perspectives. But first, if you haven't already, hop on over to iTunes, Google, Spotify, wherever podcasts are sold, and subscribe to the Be Kind podcast. And if you have any questions or outraged by anything we say, or have any concerns or comments or anything, or please just email us and let us know you're listening. It would really very much mean a lot to me. Our email address is bekindpodcast@gmail.com. And I'm sure many of you could guess that today I have John join me again, and Seth, who you may recognize from some of our book review series we've done.
Hello, hello.
So a little context for why we're bringing this discussion back up again is we had done a book review on fishes. We did one on birds. And I figured, what's the next logical thing we could talk about for books? And obviously bugs. And next time we're going to do microbes. Just kidding. That would be very silly.
Actually, that's a good idea, Joe.
Damn it. And so we originally picked a book on bugs, and it turned out to be an encyclopedia, basically, with pretty pictures, and we couldn't finish it. So instead, we did some other research, and now we're just going to talk about our general feelings towards bugs and bring up some ethical concerns that may be plaguing vegans in their activism or just their conscious or any thoughts they may have about insects and how we should treat them while practicing a vegan ethic. So Seth, do you want to take over and talk a little bit about the stuff you've been hearing about and reading?
Sure. I mean, yeah, this is a very broad topic. So, I mean, there's a lot that we could dig into and dive into. But I'll talk a little bit about the book that I read so Joe and I both tried to read this bug encyclopedia, and we couldn't. So then we split off and each read a different book. Joe, I believe you read a book about mosquitoes.
I did. And while we're talking about mosquitoes, apparently mosquitoes have essentially changed the world in every single major historical event. They've ended wars. They've caused wars. They've saved cities. They've destroyed cities. So basically, if you open up your history textbook and point to any chapter, odds are mosquitoes had something to do with it. They've killed so many people in so many ways, like yellow fever and malaria specifically. And they're really just a hugely influential force in our society, which I think speaks to the impact that insects have on the world that we as very anthropomorphic people take for granted.
Well, I mean, there's so many countless more insects on planet Earth than any other type of animal. So how could they not be influencing the course of events in our lives, even if we don't recognize it? But I would like to point out, Joe, about the mosquitoes. They're not doing those things on purpose, right? They're not like starting wars and stopping wars like with a moral clarity, are they?
No, that would be a fantastic movie, though, almost like A Bug's Life, but much, much darker. No, they are just going out there basically surviving and doing what animals do, is pass on their genes and continue their species. And they just so happen to do that by sucking our blood and giving us very infectious and deadly diseases.
Very good.
So I'm looking up here right now. 700 million people contract some kind of mosquito-borne disease.
Wow.
A year.
Wow.
And 1 million people die every year because of mosquitoes.
See, that's no joke. Well, let's put a pin in that, though, for when we come back to how we each deal with insects in our daily lives.
Yeah.
But I will briefly touch on the book I read, which was called Extraordinary Insects, which was supposed to be, I thought, a book like we had read about birds and fish, but it was
Fishes.
Fishes. Thank you so much, Joe. I hate you, but no, I do appreciate that public call out. So the book about insects that I read, though, was just painfully boring, and it was really hard to get through. But there were a couple things that I did want to point out that fascinated me, and I'll just hit them real quick. Did you know insects don't have veins or arteries? Although they do have blood. Their blood just sits in their body, and they pull oxygen into their body through their skin. Yeah, that's not really neither here nor there about insects and how they act, but it just fascinated me.
That's pretty intriguing, actually.
So if we were insects, we'd basically be like giant skin water balloons filled with blood.
Right. The insects have an exoskeleton,
Right.
so they're protected from like being squishy in that sense.
Right.
Yeah, but I guess they don't need to circulate their blood. They're kind of like a sponge in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And another thing that really got me was ants. Ants meet all the criteria that humans use for teaching. They teach each other things. There's 3 different criteria that humans use for if something is teaching, and ants do that to each other. And earwigs are very affectionate parents, and they raise their young almost like humans do. They stay with them, they feed them, they protect them until they're full grown. It's very rare in the insect kingdom, but it does happen. And just as little facts like that. There's not nearly as much anthropomorphizing to do in the insect kingdom, because they do act very differently than we do, and it's almost impossible to find a lot of examples of like, oh, here's where insects love each other. They don't do that type of stuff too often. They're very different than us, which I guess is a big takeaway from my insect book.
Mm-hmm. And from the little I read of the encyclopedia book, I think this comes back to something we discussed with the fishes book, was that the sheer variety and diversity that exists within the insect kingdom.
Right.
That is
sure, why not?
Insane. And we have a habit as people of grouping them all together into one giant, basically collective insects. It's like, oh, these are bugs. But that would be like saying these are terrestrial animals. That's by lumping people, elephants, squirrels, dogs, cats, monkeys, snakes, reptiles, what have you, into the same
right, absolutely
thing. And it's just not the case. Like you just said, there's bugs out there who are great parents. There's bugs out there who are terrible parents. There's bugs out there who have no concept of parents. It's
yeah. I mean, there's bugs out there that straight up look like quote unquote animals. You're looking at it. You're like, oh, what's this weird lizard? Like, oh, actually, that's an insect. I mean, then you got fruit flies. So it's all over the place.
So if anyone's listening out there who's an expert on insects, we're probably going to be using the term insects and bugs interchangeably and lump them all together and really just not do them justice for their diversity. And for the sake of our discussion today, I want to preface that. And for our sakes, as we talk, we're going to be very general at times in how we discuss these creatures.
And all the topics we're about to discuss, we are in no way experts on. We're just some guys talking about it.
Yes, so without further ado, I think it's time to go around the room and talk about our bird's eye view of our views on insects or bugs.
Bug's eye view?
Wouldn't that be the most specific, tiny view ever?
Well, I guess it depends on the bug. John, why don't you go ahead and how do you handle insects in your day-to-day life?
Yeah, I mean, they're obviously living beings, and I do everything I can not to hurt them. Like if I see something that's in my house, I try and get it out somehow. But obviously, there's some exceptions, like mosquitoes. If I see one on me, I get, like we were just saying, it's basically a war against them because they're out to get us, even though that's not really their intentions. They're trying to just survive like everybody else. But yeah, if I see one on me, I'm gonna get them because they're gonna give me some kind of disease probably. So, but all in all, I mean, I love most insects. I think they're awesome. They're very unique and just intriguing to me. So yeah, I like them.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. But it's weird because insects are one of the only things in human existence that like a person will kill an insect just to do it.
Right.
Like it's not like if you're sitting in your living room and you see a spider on the wall, it's not anywhere near you. It's across the room. It's not threatening you in any way. Mm-hmm. People will actually get up, go over to it, and
go out of their way.
They'll extinguish its existence for no palpable reason.
Yeah.
And that's the part that really weirds me out. Because to me, and I didn't come around to this type of thinking until I was a vegan, and not even really maybe until shortly after I was a vegan. But all life is very equal.
Right.
It's a spark of consciousness. that it's aware of itself. It's like it's the universe is aware of itself. And my conscious awareness is on a par with the conscious awareness of the spider on the wall. It's not maybe the same. It's different in many, many ways. And it's different in how I can affect the world. I can probably affect the world much more strongly than that spider can. But my spark of consciousness is not weighted any heavier than that spider's. And so to extinguish that for no reason is very strange. Now, I will say, like you said, you have to, every encounter in your life, you have to weigh the importance of what you're doing. So if a mosquito is biting me and I judge that to be a danger to me, then in that moment, I might kill that mosquito. I mean, certainly if I'm walking through the woods and I find a tick on me, I might have to kill that tick. I mean, I can just flick it off of me if it hasn't bitten me yet.
Right.
But it's self-defense in that, I mean, it's small. These are very small instances of harm or potential harm, but it's no real different than having to, I don't know, put somebody in a headlock if they're trying to steal my wallet.
Right.
Yeah, so you got to take it on a case-by-case basis, but I think once you have this philosophy, you'll find that you can actually just live with a lot of insects. If you've got a spider in your closet and you just leave it alone and you reconcile the fact that you're living in the world, that you're part of the natural world, even if you're in a man-made home. You're still part of the natural world, and you can live with a spider in your closet. And once you start to live that way for a while, it's not uncomfortable to live with insects or even mammals in your living space.
But now my next follow-up question to that is, when you're walking the woods, you're essentially stepping on countless bugs as you're walking.
That's a very interesting point, Joe.
One could make the argument that by choosing to walk in the woods, you're prioritizing your own personal enjoyment over that spark inside the insects that you just described.
Well, and this brings up a very interesting philosophy. Have you guys heard of Jainism?
I have heard of it.
I heard of it 5 minutes ago when you told me about it.
You're not supposed to tell people about our pre-show prep show.
But I have heard of it. I just, like I said earlier, like I don't know a whole lot about it, but I have heard of it.
Right. Well, the Jains is a sect of Hinduism, and so this is not a cult. Like there are, I don't know how many, but lots of people do this. This is not like 100 people that do this.
Right.
So lots and lots of people are Jains, Jain, and they will consciously make decisions to say not step in a puddle because the puddle contains microbes and they don't want to disturb them.
Right.
They don't eat tubers like potatoes and other vegetables that grow underground because they have to pull up the plant and disturb the small ecosystem around it. So they only eat plants that grow above the ground like corn and rice and things like that. They don't drink beer because they don't want to ingest the microbes, and some of them will even filter all their water before they drink it to filter out the microbes and then pour that water, the filtered aspect, back into where it came from. So the point of that is that there are people who do take it to a certain extreme. It is possible to live your life thinking about the most minute aspect of life, which is not to say that I live that way, because it's only practical for me in this version of the life that I'm living to make the decision to not purposefully kill any living animal, which includes insects. But if you want to, you can figure out their methods of how you would avoid things like accidentally killing insects.
Yeah, I think where I fall on that is similar to you, where it has to be practical. And from an activist point of view, I don't think we can go to a event and hand out leaflets advocating for Jainism. If you want to practice Jainism, by all means, have a blast. We could not get the billions of people living on this earth to all practice Jainism in a way that would create a functioning society as we see it now. Granted,
Absolutely.
It would be amazing if there was a way we could create a society where that was the norm and somehow worked into our everyday way of life. But I don't see that happening anytime soon.
Right, but my thought is that if there are hundreds of thousands of people, that's a guess, that live that way, it should be possible to not purposefully kill insects.
Yes, I think that is definitely a valid point. And where I land on this is I go through phases where I try really hard not to kill any bugs. I don't go out of my way to kill them. So I will not go across the room to kill a spider. I like spiders. They kill other bugs who I like less than spiders and save me from an ethical dilemma.
But another thing we should bring up here is arachnophobia, though.
Well, I mean, yeah, if you've got a genuine...
Right. But how do you do that as a vegan? Like, how do you, like, handle that? That's...
Yeah, but that would be tough.
I don't have that. I mean, I don't hate spiders or anything. Like, I don't go out of my way, but like they do freak me out when I see them. I'm like, ugh. But I usually just, back away. But I know some people are so scared that they'll just like smash it immediately.
Right.
Just because that's their phobia.
Well, I mean, if it's a genuine diagnosed phobia, that's one thing. A lot of people say they have a phobia when what they really have is an unconfronted fear of something.
Right.
And I think a lot of people think that they're afraid of insects, but if they took some time with somebody who wasn't afraid of insects and took some time to really confront what that was and why they were scared of it and maybe spend some time with some insects, they could get over that. I mean, I'm not a psychiatrist, but I'm pretty close to one. So.
I thought about taking a Psych 101 class once and then read my friend's book. But I'm with you on that one, John. I hate spiders, but not in the scared sense. I just don't like them crawling on me and stuff. And the way I got to that point was I used to be scared of them, but I made my desktop background a giant picture of a spider. So every time I turn on my computer, there's a big old spider staring at me. Like
the extreme close-up where they're actually kind of cute?
No, I made sure I picked ones that were scary looking. I actually had to screen them because there were some that were kind of cute with the little sad eyes thing going. Yeah. But for mosquitoes, definitely I kill mosquitoes, especially after reading that book. But even like fruit flies, I try not to kill things like fruit flies and house flies if they're buzzing around, but I'm not going to lie to you guys. Sometimes I go out of my way to kill a big old fly flying around my house.
Yeah, it can get pretty hard not to sometimes.
And right now I am reading the Expanse series, which is a science fiction book, and this is totally related, so bear with me. And also, spoiler alert potentially for the Expanse series. So if you're into it now and you don't want me to spoil anything, stop right now.
Nerd alert, nerd alert.
But in this book series, essentially they're in space exploring the wide universe as the human race, and they come across an alien species that is so far removed and above them and can manipulate the universe and planets, environment, thoughts, feelings, just so foreign to humans. But the thing is, they kill humans willy-nilly left and right because they just see humans as this weird, annoying thing. So they'll just squash a whole planet full of people for no reason whatsoever. And all the humans are freaking out, going, oh my God, we got to stop these aliens. They're killing us all. And the aliens don't even register these people because there's not even a blip on their radar. And that every time I read it, I think of bugs because we're going around killing all these bugs. Maybe they're having huge, giant crises. Families are getting broken apart and all that. And we just can't even register it because we're on such a different wavelength.
Right. Yeah. Well, and about like the fruit flies or things like that, instances where you've got insects that aren't just like one bug on the wall, like say you've got ants. I implore people to like just Google like home methods of doing away with this problem that doesn't kill them, because it's actually really easy usually, like things like peppermint oil or vinegar. Like there's usually like fruit flies you can get rid of by pouring stuff down your drains. I mean, it might kill some of them, but it'll just for the most part get them to go elsewhere.
Right. Yeah, I'm all about humanely getting rid of pests like that. Like I
John did air quotes when he said
yeah,
that.
sorry, you can't see that, but totally did that. But yeah, I agree. That's the best thing that you can do for, any kind of what you consider a pest. Like, just do it humanely.
Yeah. There's ways to persuade them to leave rather than just kill them. And you might have to live with them for a couple days or a week or more.
Because they have to figure out that this is a problem for them and they need to get out.
Right. Yeah. I guess we should talk about the increase and the hipness of the current use of insect protein across the globe.
You use that word hipness very boldly. I'm
a bold man. Fortune favors me, sir. Lately, the last couple years, The global consumption of insects as a protein source has really, really skyrocketed, even to the point that it's becoming somewhat commonplace here in the United States, which means it's serious because Americans don't eat bugs usually. So, I mean, you're not seeing a lot of actual dead bugs, but you can find insect protein a lot of places.
The McBug coming to McDonald's.
Right, yeah.
Hear you.
But yeah, sure. Throughout the world, especially in cultures where eating insects was already accepted, it's really exploded. With the reason being that it is better for the environment than livestock. So I thought maybe we should touch on that.
I thought about this a lot because we recently had a couple interviews with our friends over at Faunalytics, and a lot of the ways they analyze the impact of our food choices is the number of lives lost, the number of animals killed for our consumption. And so they looked at it and actually found that a lot of these food choices that we advocate for as vegans, like fish and seafood, we don't advocate for it, but you go to a fair and you say go vegan, they go, well, I'm almost vegan, I just eat fish every once in a while. And we say that's great. Well, actually it's terrible because seafood reduces the most amount of lives lost, and I'm thinking bugs would be exponentially worse than that. You would kill probably an incomprehensible amount of bugs to create these bug meats.
Well, I read, and I don't know if it's true, but I read that it would take 1,000 crickets to get the protein from 1 pound of beef.
That's a lot of crickets.
It sounds ridiculous, but I read it at some reputable website. I don't remember where, but
I mean, that makes sense. I mean, they're small.
Right.
So, yeah, it doesn't seem very practical to me.
I could eat, back in the day, I could pound down a pound of steak pretty easily. I cannot see myself eating 1,000 crickets.
Well, you wouldn't eat the actual crickets. They would be processed into something else. It would look like a slab of tofu or something.
So is there a lot of air in cricket?
Yeah, I'm not sure how it works to process insects and extract. What you hear always is the protein, because apparently that's all the insect eating the insect is really good for, is getting the protein.
Right.
So you're really just equating like the grams of protein that you get from eating an insect to eating a traditional quote meat source. A lot of the reasoning, the argument for it, it's you hear the argument like it's better for the environment. Well, what does that mean? So you can rear some insects on darn near anything. So you don't have to grow crops at all, for the most part, to get crickets, because crickets can live on basically trash. So there's this very strong push from the environmental perspective to say, okay, there's a lot more lives lost. Okay, sure. But not only does it not hurt the environment, but we're darn near helping it. Now, there's also been some research that says insects that are raised that way, because they can eat trash. You can raise them on trash, but they're not the same as crickets you raise on corn. So you raise crickets on actual food, and they're like much more robust. They got like 70% more protein content. So, there's all these different little avenues you can look at the problem from.
But the environment only matters because it's keeping things alive. So if you're killing things to save the environment so it can keep things alive, but you're killing things to keep it around, isn't that kind of defeating the point?
Right, and please don't misunderstand me, anyone. I'm not arguing for
I know,
but
I know.
I'm presenting the debate as it exists, and
Right.
it's complicated for us because it's hard for us to argue out of sometimes. But that's a very good point, Joe. I mean, what are we saving the environment for? We're certainly not saving it for the crickets, right?
Yeah, that's like saying I'm going to kill everyone in the city because the people in the city are contributing to the city being destroyed.
Right.
Well, it just comes to what people value. I mean, people don't value insects. They're small. They're so small, and they're so different looking from us, and they seem to operate on such a different wavelength that I think people see them as essentially disposable.
If I had an option to eat a bug-based hamburger, I probably would not. Just because I feel like it's a slippery slope as vegans, and once you open that door, you can start justifying things. And if you had the well, actually, that's so hard, Seth. 'Cause I don't know if the impact of eating traditionally produced plant-based products is worse than the impact of eating bugs.
Right. Well, and that's the problem when it comes to environmental discussions. How are we supposed to know?
Right.
I mean, I work, at an online thrift shop in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I mean, I don't have access to high-level environmental data, and nor do I have the brain that could sort and sift through the different data points and figure out which one is the victor. I'm not capable of that.
Well, I'm going to lean on the Faunalytics idea and say that the number of lives lost to produce this bug-based food would, I'm guessing, exceed the number of lives lost to grow plants. So if that being the case, I would choose the plants.
Agreed.
I mean, I come back. I always have to come back to the philosophy I outlined earlier about consciousness. I mean, I can't, in good conscience, make decisions that would wipe out the spark of hundreds of thousands or even one creature. Sometimes might me making that decision be the wrong decision for the planet? It might be, but I have no way of knowing. How do I know that? So I have to make the decision with my heart and my gut rather than try to sit down with a graphing calculator and figure out which decision actually has the best carbon footprint. I don't know how to do that.
Make sure you return that calculator at the end of the school year, otherwise you won't get your report card.
That's absolutely right. That's the Texas Instruments. So it's it's a good one.
I had a thought and I lost it, so I'm going to keep talking until I remember it.
It's always a good idea.
So back to the idea of killing insects with the justification being for the greater good.
Right.
Invasive species.
Oh.
We're in Pennsylvania, and the spotted lanternfly is a thing. We're in New York right now, but I've been going over to Lancaster every once in a while. And when you go over to Lancaster, there's these spotted lanternflies everywhere. And judging off the posters I've seen in our York County parks, much love York County parks.
What?
These spotted lanternflies are apparently bad for the forests and plants and hurt certain kinds of trees and things. And they always advocate to kill these flies, and I don't know where I fall on it.
Neither do I. John?
Same.
Good talk, guys.
Now we have this conversation.
So I think it comes back to a lot of the things we talked about before, where this is so hard.
Well, here's how I've always thought about it, but this is just a guy thinking about things. I am in no way educated on this type of science or biology. But who decides that something's invasive? Like, where does that... Like, before humans were around, species moved around the globe. Now, they did it slower because they didn't have the species like humans with airplanes and boats moving around super quickly that would speed this process up.
Right.
But animals have always moved, changed their environment, and whenever they do, havoc has ensued. I mean, that happens before we were around. Humans have sped up the process, but it's not that spotted lanternfly's fault that we have done it. So if the spotted lanternfly is chewing through, the telephone lines, I don't know. I don't know what it's doing, but if it's hurting the infrastructure, I mean, I don't know what the solution is, but I'm not going to kill any animal because of it.
Yeah, I think it comes down to we are essentially saying that this tree that this fly is hurting is worth more than this fly because we said so.
Right, exactly.
Call me crazy, but I don't think the world's going to end because the spotted lanternfly destroys all these trees. Granted, it may be less conducive to human pleasure, joy, or even on a practical level, but the world will keep spinning, natural life will keep on going, and here's a bombshell for you guys. Aren't humans the invasive species?
Oh! Absolutely.
He went there, he did it.
Yeah, as Seth was saying, we are constantly putting ourselves into environments where there's no competition. We can just do whatever we want and destroy everything. I read an article in the paper today that climate change is irreversible right now, apparently.
Yay, we did it, guys.
Yay.
Even if we become carbon neutral, damage is done.
Yeah. So if the spotted lanternfly is invasive and it's going to wreak havoc, I don't know how or why that happened. I didn't look into this, but I'm almost certain it's because of us. Because if we didn't cause it, then it's just the natural world changing. The only, like, you hear a lot about, I forget the name of it. That's what it made me sound so smart. But there's a type of fish that's very invasive in the Great Lakes, and it's ruining the Great Lakes ecosystems. And they keep calling it invasive, and please everybody kill all these fish. But it's only happened because of us, because we transported this fish from its natural, quote unquote natural environment to a new one. This fish wasn't like wake up one day and they were like, "Hey guys, let's go to a new lake." I was like, no, they don't know where they came from. They're just like, that's where they're at. So they're not an invasive species. They're a species we moved. Whether we moved them, there's people like moving them on purpose, or whether it's like the spotted lanternfly that maybe was a quote unquote hitchhiker, is a method that they call these, where they'll like get on a plane or on a boat, and then they just move around.
So how did that fish get there? That's what I'm.
Well, it's got something to do with the St. Lawrence Seaway, which is this complicated system of.
You know everything but the name of the fish.
It's a complicated system of waterways that connects the Great Lakes, and there's a couple man-made spots in there, and some of them where there's like dams that open and close, and this fish got through a place that we made, and moved between lakes or water waterways.
Gotcha. So we didn't actually transport the fish; it just snuck in.
It snuck in, but via a way that would not have existed in the natural world. Yeah.
But it sounds like it probably was something similar would have existed at some point, given the way the world kind of.
But we sped it up.
Right. Yeah. Probably.
Like you were saying before.
So I think to try and wrap this all in a nice environmentally friendly bubble made of sustainable plastics or recycled goods, where I fall on this is I cannot in good conscience assign value to living creatures and the expense of another living creature's life. So that is why I do my best to avoid killing bugs, regardless of the perceived negative outcome they will have on the environment as I see it.
Yeah, if I can get a little high level in here, a little philosophical again, but any creature that's alive that has consciousness is, and I don't mean this in a religious sense, but it's a miracle. That is the universe looking at itself. I mean, that's crazy, right? I mean, a rock can't do that. Like the sun can't do that. But here on Earth, and maybe other places, probably other places, certain things have happened where molecules get together and become aware of themselves. Stomping on that is shameful. That's all I have to say about that. John?
I agree. I mean, that's a great way to look at it. I agree with that. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I love all insects and everything, but yeah, when it comes to like my life being at risk,
Right. I mean, I don't want to kill people either, but I'd shoot somebody in the head if they were about to shoot me in the head.
Right. So yeah, I mean, I don't purposely go out of my way to do it, but if it's happening, I have to do something. But yeah, I think all animals should have the right to exist. So there's that.
And I'm going to have the caveat here that if for some reason your way of living right now involves harming insects, and that is just how you feel the need to live your life, I don't want you to feel ashamed or embarrassed or feel like you're not living up to your ethics. You got to do whatever you got to do to make it through the day. But just us personally here at this table, these are our own personal viewpoints and our ways of living.
I couldn't agree more, Joe. It's all a continuum or a timeline of trying to just do the best you can. And I mean, not everyone's at the same place, and not everyone is going to end up at the same place. But you just make every decision the best you can.
Yeah, I think it sounds like a great place to leave off.
Sounds good.
Yeah, well, everyone, thanks for listening. And if you want to email us your thoughts about bugs and insects, or tell us how we are wildly off base on some of these ideas we threw out there, send us an email, bekindpodcast@gmail.com. Bye.
3, 2, 1.
Meow, meow, meow. Meow, meow, meow. Meow, meow, meow. Meow, 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 meow. Meow, 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 meow.